Robert Abreu, Dominicans on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs. We also have Frank Garcia, New York State Coalition of Chambers of Commerce. Giovanni Tavares, Property Systems for your PC, Veterans Chamber Council, and Daniel Fountainberry, publisher. We could not have completed this project without their knowledge, their support, and their participation. Today, I am unveiling New York's first MWB letter grading system, a report we call Making the Grade. We graded 32 agencies, 31 mayoral agencies, as well as the Comptroller's office, on their success in using minority and women-owned firms in procurement. The goal is to encourage agencies to redouble their efforts and get more contracts into the hands of these crucial job creators. It's a long overdue reform, because today, only 3.9% of our city's 17.8% billion procurement budget goes to women and minority-owned businesses. 3.9% in a city with over 300,000 women-owned firms and 400,000 minority-owned firms. 3.9% in a city with over 3 million foreign-born residents. 3% in a city that prides itself as a place where opportunity comes to those who work hard, regardless of color or creed. It's a disgraceful number, and we are going to change it. And let me be absolutely clear, this is a watershed moment in New York City government. Growing the pie for MWB firms will increase competition in procurement, drive down costs for taxpayers, and create jobs. But just as important, it will be a key weapon in our battle against income inequality. Make no mistake, the challenge of diversity in procurement is the next big civil rights issue that New York must confront. Because in New York, diversity isn't some buzzword. It's a fundamental economic development principle. And one of the ways we put that principle to work is right here at home, through billions of dollars that New York City spends every year buying goods and services. Now, for over 20 years, the city's tried to expand procurement opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. From Mayor Dinkins' efforts to boost opportunity in the early 1900s, to Local Law 1, which last year set forth new MWB procurement targets for city agencies. These efforts have led many companies to go through the process of being officially certified as a minority and women-owned business. Since 2007, we have 3,800 businesses that have been certified. And yet, where the rubber meets the road, on actual spending by city agencies, these businesses are still being left behind. Now, as shown in this chart, while the NWB's share of city procurement has increased between FY13 and FY14, the share has actually dropped from 5% in 2012 to 3.9% in 2013. We can do better. My office already holds agencies accountable through audits, contract review, and our new initiative, ClaimStat. Now we're going to hold agencies accountable for their MWB performance for the very first time. Now, just as letter grades raise public health standards, it is our hope that these grades will change the conversation about city procurement. Now, let me tell you up front, there's a lot of room for improvement. As you can see from the slide, not a single agency received an A, and only 2 agencies received a B. Now, we're not doing so hot in the Comptroller's office. My office earned a grade of C along with 8 other agencies. We looked at ourselves as well, and we got a C. 21 of the 32 agencies are either Ds or Fs. And overall, I'm sorry to say, the citywide average is a D. Now, our grading system is shaped by Local Law 1. Local Law 1 establishes citywide goals for MWB procurement broken down along ethnic and industry lines. They include Black, Hispanic, Asian, and women-owned firms in construction, professional services, standard services, and goods. For instance, I want you to take a look at construction. As you see here, under the law, our citywide target for construction spending with Black-owned firms is 8%. Now, likewise, under Local Law 1, they're supposed to shoot for 4% among Latinos, 8% among Asian Americans, 18% 13% among women-owned firms and 6% among emerging firms. We use these goals as a framework for our grades. First, we determine the total spending by each agency. Next, we determine each agency's spending across each category and industry. Then we weighted the results based on where the agency spent. So, for instance, if an agency spends 50% of their money on construction, and then 50% of the grade is based on construction spending. And finally, we assigned a letter to the weighted score. Now, I want you to just take a look at, I'm going to point to two agencies. You have a packet of all the agencies, but I want to take a closer look at how two agencies did to show you exactly how the grades work. First, let's look at the Department of Cultural Affairs, since they're the top of the class. Cultural Affairs spends across all 4 industry categories. The agency did very well in goods, hitting or nearly reaching 3 out of the 4 targets. In addition, the agency exceeded targets for Asian American and Hispanic construction, as well as Latino professional services. However, when you break it down, the agency barely spent any of its $2 million on standard services with MWBs and failed to engage any African American or women-owned firms in construction or professional services. So as a result, the agency received a B overall. Now I want to zoom in on another agency, the Department of Homeless Services. Can we get this? Now DHS exceeded the goal for construction with Asian American firms and did reasonably well with all MWBE groups for goods. However, in professional services and standard services, where DHS spent the bulk of its procurement, less than $2 million of $59 million went to MWBEs. As a result, DHS received a D. The grades are designed to give agency heads a drilled down look at how they're doing on MWB procurement so that they can focus on areas in need of improvement and ultimately boost spending with these firms. Now, the report we're issuing today provides a series of recommendations to strengthen the MWB procurement program. First, expanding the contracts that fall under Local Law 1, which could include holding agencies accountable for spending in their supply chain, and that's called Tier 2 spending. Also, we've got to improve city agency websites to provide more information about the procurement process. We also need better classifying of contracts. We found that too often agencies are failing to properly tag contracts, making it difficult to assess MWB performance. And we want to build out the Comptroller's MWB program to serve as a model for other agencies in the procurement process. And you're going to hear more from us about how we're doing because we want to lead. We got to see, we've got to get to an A. We have to put our money where our mouth is on this issue. And as Comptroller, I have the responsibility to envision our economic future decades down the line and to take concrete steps to ensure that all people in every neighborhood have an equal chance to succeed. That means engaging stakeholders at the local, state, and federal level on a broad opportunity agenda. If we're going to be committed to using every level at our disposal to expand opportunity, we need to do more to boost procurement with our different communities. We can't keep patting ourselves on the back for getting businesses certified when time and time again these businesses are unable to secure contracts. Now it's my hope that these grades lead to a meaningful change and that this time next year, more city agencies will be making the grade. I'm very happy you're here today. I want to once again thank our team. I want to thank our board of excellent reps that I mentioned earlier, people who donated their time. I also want to recognize our Chief Diversity Officer in the Comptroller's office who's worked on these issues and national issues, Cara Wallace, who's here. She's going to answer questions as well. Her deputy is Wendy Garcia. They work together. We also have our first Deputy Comptroller, Elena Gilligo, with us, and many others I'll say thank you to as well. So I'm happy to take questions on this topic and start the process. Sally.
Could you just describe in some detail like how you came to each grade, what was weighed in, and it might be in here, but just the grading system that you used?
Essentially, as I mentioned before, we looked at the total spend, broke it down by agency, broke it down by category. So let me give you an example. Can we go back to, give me one of the agencies.
Right.
Just pop it up for a second. So you look at cultural affairs, and according, based to our report, they did reasonably well in many categories. So we looked at where they did well, Asian American, Latino, and that certainly put them at a very high part of their spend in these categories. They did well here. But then what offsets that is when it comes to women and African American spend, they did very poorly. So you can't get an A, you get a B because you did well in a number of categories. So we arrive at a B. And that's how we did this. Kara, do you want to just add to this game?
Yes, so as you think about grading, and it's not rocket science, what you look at is the total spend. You look at the total spend within an ethnic group, and then divide that by the total spend of that industry. So, for example, you look at Black Americans, and then, and you see where, well, actually that's a bad thing, didn't spend anything there. But with Asian Americans, you see that they actually spent $474,000 with Asian Americans. You would then take and divide the total spent in construction and get that percentage. We then compared that percentage against the target that was in the local law 1 target chart. And we basically came up with a grade for each block in this 4x4 matrix and averaged that, and that's how we came out with each grade for the agency.
And by the way, if people have more questions on that, we're going to stick around afterwards just to get in the weeds on how we did this.
In terms of the time period covered, could you explain that a little? Does it factor in that, we have a new mayor, we have new agencies since January? And then the second part of the question is, do you think we would see significant improvement if we had more ethnic minority agency heads as well as more women agency heads?
Well, I think that we saw an uptick in recently as it relates to procurement. It's hard to think that going from 2.7% to 3.9% is something to be proud of, but I do think that we can work with agencies. You do see an uptick. We're still way behind because we were at 5% in 2012, but the bottom line here is we're moving too slowly. We are not putting the marker down with agencies. We're not doing this type of evaluation. So my job is to push and prod and to put out these grades because we want every agency, those agencies that are not doing well, to sit with their own folks and come up with a plan. And I hope that we can get there. We want very much to work with the agencies to get with them, and part of what we're doing tomorrow is we are briefing and meeting with a number of the agencies who are coming to meet with our legislative people, as well as our procurement people, and obviously Kara will be there as well. So this is not just to put up some letter grades and you're on your own. We actually want to come in and be helpful as possible. Michael?
What about the other part of the question?
In terms of,
do you think we would see significant difference if we had more ethnic minorities leading these agencies?
well, I think we share the goal of the administration, putting more people of diverse backgrounds in position of power in the city. But again, I think the real issue is this is not about, people can talk about income inequality and you can put that marker down, but here is where the city has to show the world that we've got to clean up our own house. You can't champion this issue unless you're ready to deliver in areas where you can. $17.8 billion in procurement, and only 3.9% of that money goes to minority and women-owned firms, is an absolute disgrace and should not be tolerated. So we need to move all the agencies. I think the letter grading system will help move this process, because next year, I'm coming back with another letter grade for every agency, including my own. And the reason, again, we put our agency out there is because this is about all of us working together to get to this result.
What do you think the problem is? Like, why do you think that these grades are so low? I mean, even in your own office, what do you think has been keeping agencies from engaging with, MWBE?
Because I think it takes work, and I think, in all fairness, there was such a, from my perspective, and Dr. Graff has talked about this, there was such a effort to certify MWBs that the trail was never finished. We never said, okay, so at the end of this process, can these firms actually access contracts? And I don't think we have mentored these firms. I don't think we spent the time within the agencies getting them into meetings where they can compete. And I think this has always been half a loaf. And now what we're looking at is the actual spend, which we see as being absolutely unacceptable. So part of what we have to do is make the websites user-friendly. I actually think that the women and minority-owned businesses, the 3,800 that are certified, they're gonna now see where the agencies are lacking. So if you're a firm that has particular expertise, whether it's providing goods or professional services, you can now look at the buckets and see where an agency has to do better, and perhaps that will give you an entree to that agency. So this is also meant to be a guide to people who want to do business with the city. Michael.
Following up on the time frame question, obviously this data spans 2 administrations. So does your research show whether or not there was better effort or better success over the last 6 months when the new mayor took office? And I assume they're going to say, hey, we're working on this. Do you think that he should be held accountable for the findings here today?
Look, everyone should be held accountable. I've been now Comptroller for 9 months. I should be held accountable. Of course, this mayor should be held accountable, as the previous administration. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because part of what I have to do is hold everybody accountable, including my own office. And that's what we're trying to do here. In terms of, what we looked at, some of it obviously we looked at this year. Some of this is part of previous administration. But by any measure, nobody can be satisfied with what's here today.
Have you seen any sort of uptick over the last 6 months with respect to
Well, I think when you look at the year, you do see an uptick from 2.7% in total spend, the totality of the spend. So I'm glad we're going up, not down. But we're not at the 5% that we were in 2012. That's disturbing. And I think we have to be mindful of the fact that we're not hitting the goals of what local law 1 is all about within those agencies. And even, you could argue, and some have argued, even the goals of local law 1 are not as, they're not as, they're not as aspirational as perhaps I would like.
So about that 5% number, that's obviously the high point as far as the procurement share. What factors contributed to the precipitous drop the following year, 2.7%?
Do you want to take that, do you want to give it that?
Yeah, so I think that what we're seeing, and let's just face it, the MWBE programs of New York City weren't that good. There wasn't the focus on it that should have been. And so you did see it go down, and hence why they enacted Local Law 1. Local Law 129 that was in place before Local Law 1 had some different parameters. It actually only looked at contracts under $1 million. As we talk about in the report, Local Law 1 expands that beyond contracts over $1 million. So there are factors like that that, again, change the focus, expand the scope, and hopefully we'll continue to see it move forward.
And I just want to add what I think is significant about what we're doing here. We're not just posting a letter grade. We're actually posting some serious data that can be analyzed by all of you, by MWB firms, and also by the administration. So a lot of work went into drilling down as much data that we can, and hopefully we're going to continue to add to this. Let me get one more. One more.
Two questions. What letter grade would you give the mayor as far as this issue goes since he's taken office? And what more could he be doing as the city's chief administrator to kind of move things along with this?
So we gave the city agencies covered by local law 1, we gave everybody a D. You know, we rated, we have a curve, obviously, starting with cultural affairs, no one received an A. So we give the city agencies a D. Again, we give us a C. What more can be done? Well, we make some recommendations. We need to do better on our websites. We need to improve communication with the city agencies. That's why we're bringing city agencies in tomorrow. We need to better classify and tag the contracts because a lot of the data is not being captured because city agencies are not doing their due diligence on this, and that's very troubling. We also need to expand the contracts that fall under local law 1. We should include holding agencies accountable for spending. Let's put more data into this. So I do think there is going to be an effort to address some of these issues. You know, a lot of what I agree with the administration is how do we deal with income inequality and the fact that when you look at something like this, the real tragedy of this is so many of these firms, if they were able to access doing business with the city, many of these firms would be located in communities that need economic development, need more spend as a way of creating jobs and creating economic activity. So through the lens of income inequality, it is important that within city government where you can make fundamental change, this is a great place to start because we're going to fight very hard to raise the minimum wage. That's a fight that happens at Albany. We're going to look at changing federal policy so that we can bring more people to the table economically. But here's something all of us in city government can do. This is something that we have a real shot at making a difference. If we can get to 8%, 9%, 10%, you do the math. We're talking about infusing companies that do business around the city with billions of dollars more, and that's going to make a big difference. These companies are going to hire in communities. These companies are going to train people in communities, and this is something that I think is very exciting. Why not get the best African American and Latino law firms to be part of this? Why not the accounting firms? Why not professional services? Why not the people who manufacture goods that we need? That's what we have to think about. Okay? Any other? Any off-topic questions? Anything?
Can you comment on your office's perceived exclusion from the living wage expansion?
The what?
The living wage expansion?
What do you mean? Well, it wasn't perceived, it's a fact. So here's the issue. I commend the mayor for expanding a living wage for more individuals. It's something I've long supported, and I think it's very significant. But what I don't understand is why you would expand the wage for a class of workers and then remove the independent agency that watches out for the rights of those workers. That, to me, makes no sense. So you're taking that authority to investigate and putting it into a mayoral agency with no history or track record for doing this work. The Comptroller does investigation and enforcement on prevailing wage. Since I became Comptroller, we have debarred more companies than ever before. We have a very professional unit that does it. Now you're taking away, by executive order, our ability to do our job. You bypass the city council because you didn't need to go and have hearings and go through a deliberative legislative process. And then, in the middle of the night, you issue an executive order. You don't tell anybody about it. And then you think that's okay. Well, I'm here to tell you something. We're going to do our job. We're going to audit and investigate. We're going to letter grade agencies. And we're going to speak up loud and clear when we see something going in the wrong direction. Your answer should not be to take away my authority. Your answer should give us the ability to do our job. But we have a number of tools in the toolbox to do our job. It's unfortunate that they took this tack. I actually think that you should be looking at ways to engage the city council so that they can hold hearings, they can do their work, calling on the city council to put forth legislation that would give back the ability of us to look at living wage at the 13, at the next phase of capture of those workers.
Just following up, my understanding is that the order specifically says that it does not infringe upon your ability or right to investigate and monitor this issue.
That is totally not true. Straight out. By taking the authority of this class of workers and trying with a wink and a nod to think that we still have the authority to look at workers at $11 an hour when it's now $13 an hour, we will be happy to sit down with our council and take you through that. But the only thing I would urge everybody to do, don't take their word for it. Take the opportunity to actually look at what happened yesterday. I'm disappointed that they do this, but the facts speak for themselves. We need to have an independent arbiter on these issues. And if you look at the different checks and balances in the city, the controller plays a vital role on wage enforcement, on prevailing wage. We could take you through the work that has occurred here. Years before I got here, there is a professional group of people that do this every day.
So your legal counsel believes that this order prevents you from doing what you have to
On that category, we believe that, and we'll be happy to take you
Are
through it.
you planning to sue?
We are looking at every option right now.
Thank you, I think that's it.